Maybe you've got a job coming up where you've got to pick up the phone and order some crushed rock. Well, let me tell you what, there's more to crushed rock than meets the eye. I'm standing in the Swan Quarry right now. Basalt used to belong to Si, my good friend Si. Now it belongs to Aaron, his son. And there are several stacks of 3/4 minus, 2-inch minus, some big rock. There's a wide variety of rocks, and I'm going to show you what it is that I know about the rocks that are here and the rocks in some other places. So I'm going to walk through here and show you whatever it is I know, because doggone it, if you need rock, it's got to be the right rock. There's some rock here. Let's talk about what rock is like when it comes out of the ground and what it's like after it's crushed up. We'll talk more about sizes, from big down to tiny, and when you might think about using which, in which kind of a job, because if you got a job, you got to know. But just the way this stuff comes into existence is pretty cool. Look at this. So that is called the face. That's a face of basalt. I don't know if you would say that's marine basalt. Don't know the difference. But basalt is a volcanic rock. It's lava that has cooled, and in the cooling it gets different characteristics. I mean, there's columnar basalt. I think that's a marine basalt. It makes those basalt posts like you've seen in Ken Jordan's rock garden. Basalt comes in different compressive strengths, they tell me. And not every rock is equally hard, right? Just like every piece of concrete is not equally hard. It's because the rocks aren't equally hard. It takes a certain rock to qualify for certain government spec jobs. And I think, will you guys correct me when I'm wrong on all of this, because don't forget I am a carpenter. But I think that asphalt requires about the best rock. Now, I don't know what it's like in the East. I was back there a few years ago, and the granite is gorgeous. And I know less than nothing about that, but this is called the face. This is the face of the pit. And it is just increasingly dangerous because rocks fall, right? I mean, gravity brings those rocks down. I don't know how they get up there and scrape off the overburden. You see that brown, the dirt up there? It starts with dirt and then it becomes shale. There's a kind of a reddish orange line where it's shale. Shale deteriorates in the light. It deteriorates with water. It's junk. And then in a good pit, the rock gets harder sometimes the further down you go. But they've got to get up there and they've got to drill, and they load the holes with dynamite, with powder. And on a given day, I'd love to be here when it happens, the shot goes off and it just disrupts and heaves and pushes and fractures the rock. Some of you are expert at this. Will you fill us in the comments about how the calculation goes for fracture and trying to estimate the size of the rocks that come out and end up on the floor of the quarry and are scooped up with a loader and dropped into a crusher and screened? It's fantastic. All right, let's talk about sizes and use cases. At some level, when the blast goes off, some of these things are ejected, or gravity pulls them down to the bottom of the pit. This is called riprap. Clearly, it's too big to move by hand. Equally clearly, it works really good for retaining hillsides. You can stack up beautiful rock walls like we did at the spec house, or just for decoration. These things placed appropriately in landscaping are permanent, and they look good. Now, sort of moving from the biggest, the baddest, down in size, this is probably a pretty good little stack of what you might call man rock, right? I mean, because there's at least a chance that a guy can pick these up and stack them. Man rock. Now, they will definitely smash your fingernails, but you can get a trailer load of these. You can ask for man rock and tell them, if you've got a good, strong teenage boy who needs to wear some of the skin off the palm of his hand, there's nothing like some of this stuff to do it. So stepping down further, these things, in the 4, 5, 6-inch range around here are called gabion rock. They're used to fill gabion baskets, more retaining. You saw me put quite a bit of this stuff on the hillside underneath those arborvitae trees I planted. This stuff has not been sorted or screened. It's just sort of some pit run that's kind of raveled down the hill. And it may not be hard enough. I mean, here's an example of probably what you would call overburden. That looks to me like shale, or certainly has shale characteristics. It's not terribly hard, probably deteriorates in the rain. That piece of basalt has been a little bit compromised with the fracturing. See that? I mean, that's shale. That's junk. That's overburden. It's mixed in here. But that's part of what the screening and processing and crushing aspect of what goes on here is trying to accomplish, separating wheat from chaff. So I'm not a geotech, right? I'm a carpenter and a blacksmith. But shale, I think, is sort of a sedimentary rock. I mean, I think if you put a cup of that in the bottom of a bucket and let it sit out in the winter rain, in the spring you'd have mud in the bottom of that bucket. That's not structural. It's not something that you would want to use for road base. But that's why the overburden is sorted out. It sort of brings up the topic of pit run is the stuff maybe sort of like this that can be loaded out with a shovel and sent for base, road base. In the past, you would use big rock under a road base, particularly one that was going to be taking a lot of traffic, and then gradually reduce in size in sort of regular, clean increments because it bridges. You could see that you could put, 8-inch rocks on top of 20-inch rocks, and on top of the 8-inch rocks, you could go with 4-inch rocks and 2-inch rocks, and finally smaller rocks so everything bridges. But now in the era of road fabric that you can lay down pretty much across a swamp and then put 3 feet of 1-inch minus and get the same effect, road base is not as widely used maybe as it used to be. So I'm thinking that this is a decent representation of what you might call pit run. It's sort of what happens when the blast goes off and the big rocks are drug out. This is sort of let's call it the average of the chaos and the fracture and the reduction in size that happens before this is scooped up and dropped into a crusher and screened into the specific, 3-inch open, 3-inch minus, 2-inch open, 2-inch minus, 1-inch open, 1-inch minus for different applications, specified in many cases either by the buyer said, hey, I need a load of clean 3-inch, or an engineer on a drawing somewhere that says, this many inches of 2-inch open or 2-inch minus. So there's a good example of overburden and shale. You see that orange, brown stuff on the right? That's junk. I mean, your garden won't grow in it and it won't stand up under a road. But then it starts getting gray and hard. And when you run into that with an excavator, it starts to smoke. That is, when the teeth come across the rock, the powder sort of springs up from underneath the teeth. That's hard. That's hard. And so the harder it gets, the better it is. And the top stuff up there, the overburden, has to be scraped off, pushed off to the side, and maybe somebody will need some clean fill that is not specifically structural. So we're standing in front of what I think is a small pile of 3-inch minus. That is, everything in here will pass through a 3-inch screen. Now, like that rock is 4 inches across there, but you turn it the other way and it'll drop through the 3-inch screen. If it was 3-inch open, it wouldn't be with the minus. It wouldn't have the smaller pieces down to the dust like this does. It would just be the pieces of rock themselves that pass through the screen, and it would have been screened again and again and again to get rid of the crusher dust, the 1-inch, the 2-inch, the smaller pieces, leaving just open or clean 3. Now, a use case for that, you can use open 2, that is 2 without the dust, for drain rock in a septic system. It's not ideal. I mean, a washed rock is better, but if all you need is rock that bridges, that creates little structures down in the ground and sort of distributes point loads to a wider footprint, big rocks, bigger, 6-inch, 4-inch, 3-inch, 2-inch, open, are going to do that. And then at some point, you can cap it with some sort of a minus, which can be smoothed and graded and made friendlier. Why the distinction between open or clean and minus with the fines? It's because the minus is binder. And when that is at its optimum moisture content, which is enough moisture to hold it together so you can kind of squeeze it into a ball, man, it'll compact. Now, it won't when it's dry, but the fines are binder. It'll hold it together, right? Whereas open is just kind of a handful of marbles. You can see that you could compact that over and over and over, and it's never going to lock into a place. But on the other hand, if your driveway is topped with this stuff, it'll get rained on and cleaned off, and you won't be tracking that black, dark dirt into the house. Because fines are kind of like dirt, and they will pack tight enough, did I say this already, to shed water and look like asphalt. But in a rainstorm, the top of this is going to stick to the bottom of your boot. So, in general, for drainage, for water running through, you want rocks without the fines. For structural strength and ease of grading and the smooth feeling underfoot, you want rocks with the fines, with the minus. So this is just one example of how crushed 1-inch minus can be graded and compacted until it almost looks like asphalt for a while. Now, yes, it will degrade because no, it is not asphalt, but it just smooths out so nice in the black color, and even a little plate tamp like this can get, the top 4 or maybe 6 inches pretty darn hard. A vibratory roller, after it's been smoothed out by a machine, can really make it look like asphalt. Now, the material that I'm shoveling right here is 1/4-inch minus. It's also known as crusher dust because it's what's left over after all of the bigger rocks have been separated. And it's really nice to shovel and grade and put in place. It's smooth. And even though it's too small to have any real structural strength on its own, in a confined area where it can't get away under pressure, man, it solves problems. And I don't know if you knew this or not, but because of environmental regulations, there's a worldwide sand shortage. Yeah, a worldwide shortage of sand. And crusher dust, 1/4-inch minus, is a perfectly suitable alternative for grading under concrete, in my opinion. So all this talk about rock and gravel unavoidably leads to the conversation of shovels, right? I mean, not everybody has hydraulics. We've done some videos on how to shovel. If you can believe it, there are some things you might want to know about how to shovel. But as I wrap this up in the wind, if you're one of those who are thinking of moving to the country, yes. But be aware of a couple of things. For instance, I think in Douglas County there might be 20 or maybe as many as 24 active rock pits. And people move in, and the valleys are beautiful, and the cows are bucolic, and the horses and the dogs and the cats and the sheep, wow, we want to live here. And they buy a piece of property and they think, this is just what I always wanted. And then one day, wait a minute, what was that noise? Well, that noise was your neighbor setting off a shot in this hillside where he and she have been making crushed rock for, 80 years. Well, sometimes people get disappointed. Sometimes they get litigious. I don't want to listen to a rock crusher. I don't want to listen to crushed rock being made, even though I needed crushed rock to put my road in and to build the base under my house, and I needed to retain the banks on my creek and even though I need it, I sure don't need it in my neighborhood. Can you see the hypocrisy? Rock pits are a vital part of what it means to live in a civilized world. I, for one, like living in a civilized world. I, for one, deeply respect the people who use some part of the ground for which they have stewardship to produce some part of what we all need wherever we live. Thank you for watching Essential Craftsman, and keep up the good work.